Council member with the City and County of Broomfield.
Councilmember Schaaf, thanks for being with us this evening.
Of course.
I think I'm the only Michael, right?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mike Calderazzo. I'm the fire chief for the city of Boulder.
Chief, thanks for joining us. And we'll go over to, let's see, Councilmember Brown. Karen's with us. Eric.
Hi, this is Kyle Brown from the council member in the city of Louisville.
Thank you for joining us. Ken, I can see you there.
Hello? Oh, yeah.
I was looking for Ken Lenarchik.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was up. Ken Lenarchik from town of Jamestown. I'm an administrative volunteer for the town.
Thank you.
Eric Coombs Ismail, I'm a trustee for Nederland.
Trustee Coombs, good to see you again. It's been a bit. Appreciate you
Hi.
joining. And then we'll go to Tim Swoop, let's see, and then Councilmember Martin, Trustee Harrison.
Hello, this is Trustee Harrison from Erie. Apologize for no video. I'm actually dropping my daughter off at soccer tryouts here in Boulder. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for keeping your kiddo in soccer.
Absolutely. She's very excited. She was in a rainstorm yesterday practicing.
Great. I think it was Tim next and then Marcia.
Yeah, hi, Tim Swope with Boulder County Public Works, going to be presenting the transportation sales tax update to everyone today.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Marcia Martin, Longmont City Council member, having camera trouble. I'll reappear if I can figure out how.
Good. Well, thanks for being here. We're graceful, like I said, we'll be patient. Next, I've got Clay and then Christina and then Kathleen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Clay Shuck. I'm with the City and County of Broomfield, and I oversee the emergency management group. And so the presentation tonight from the town of from Jamestown is interesting to us. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm an assistant city and county attorney in Broomfield. I was invited to listen to the conversation about the wildfires as well.
Great, thank you. Kathleen, I think you're up next.
Oh, great. Good evening. I'm Kathleen Brackey. I'm with Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting and lead our transportation planning team. And I'm here this evening with Tim Swope to present on the transportation sales tax item. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, Cindy, and then Mayor Peck.
Good evening. I'm Gary Sanfason. I'm the Disaster Recovery Manager for Boulder County.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Cindy Copeland. Oops, I think I'm frozen. I'm the Air and Climate Policy Analyst, and I'm on the policy team with Mark, and I'm just listening in tonight. Thanks.
Great.
Hi, I'm Joan Peck. I'm Mayor of Longmont, and I'm here for the transportation tax, as well as everything else you can present that's on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us as well. All right. I believe I got everybody, but again, we'll pause if other folks are able to join us and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. So the agenda's in the chat. Is there anybody that didn't grab it or wasn't able to see it? Sometimes, depending on when you jump in, you may not have access to it. So just put a note in the chat if you want us to repost it. We're happy to do that. And thanks, Mark, for doing that. So we have been, as you all, some of you all may know, that the Consortium of Cities together collectively, the members, all the electeds from the different groups that make up the consortium, choose the topics to focus on for the year. And we've really been trying to come together, bring some information to share what you're working on and you've done, you're thinking about doing, and trying to learn from each other to do whatever that topic might be or work on that topic. And interestingly enough, some of these topics mean different things to different communities, which I think is really great. And it's also helpful for us to be aware of what is happening for each of us in different towns and cities, et cetera. And so that is similar for the meeting topic of this evening. Natural disaster resilience looks different for everybody. Maybe historically, maybe currently, and what your future planning is. So we are going to hear some of those presentations, and I'll check in with Mark here because there may be an update that I don't even know about somebody else presenting, as can be. We try and keep those presentations about 5 to 7 minutes so that folks can then ask questions. We can do some brainstorm, sharing of ideas right after each presentation. And that way we also have this evening a couple of other pieces. One, our 2022, which is an annual update. This is on countywide transportation sales tax. We want to make sure folks have an opportunity to ask some questions. And it may be an appropriate time as well if there are ballot initiatives people are working on that you just want to share about for an awareness as well. And then we've got, as you know, the last time we met, there was some conversation bringing back the conversation from previous in 2019 around the livable wage. And so we've got an update from that group this evening just to let us know where they're at and hopefully have a couple, some suggestions on where we might be going next as far as the consortium. So that's where we're headed this evening. We always do share out events that y'all are working on, shout outs for your town, anything else that you want to report out. ARPA seems to be a continual conversation as well. So if there's things that in that realm and you want to dig them up and get them ready, please do. So all of that being said, we'll start with our meeting topics. Mark, I want to just check in with you because I know we had Boulder County had some information to share as well as Jamestown this evening. Were there any other folks that had sent you presentations?
I have not received any presentations, but I suspect some of the other communities are prepared to present this evening, I think.
Okay, great. Well, then we'll start with those presentations before we get into the, is that how you were thinking, Mark? I guess I should double check.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. And it turns out, unfortunately, our guest from the governor's office had a last minute change of plans and is not able to attend, but Gary Sanfison from Boulder County was very involved in the crafting of Senate Bill 206 this past session. A portion of that bill creates what's called the Office of Climate Preparedness in the governor's office. And Gary has some knowledge of what the office is planning to do and the process it will be undertaking here as it gets once the bill gets signed into law, which will happen actually tomorrow in Louisville, and once the office gets stood up. And so Gary's going to speak to that for a bit. And then we do have the presentation from Jamestown, from Ken Lenarchik, and perhaps the Boulder Fire Chief has a presentation. But we can start with Gary if that works.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that introduction. Gary, take it away.
Okay, great, thanks. And I'm going to apologize. I don't know as much as the governor's rep, Jonathan Ashner, but I'll do my best. He did send me some talking points, and I included in the chat a job description that was recently closed for the manager of the Office of Climate Preparedness in the governor's office. So you can take a look at that, probably give you a little more detail as well. So let me just take a look at this. Okay, so this is what they've informed me, and as Mark said, there were a number of aspects to the bill, Senate Bill 206. One part, as you probably well know, was to provide a funding source for resilience rebuilding, especially around electrification for post-disaster events starting back in 2019 and going into the future. There's a portion that's earmarked for the Marshall Fire survivors. And then the other big piece of this is the establishment of the Office of Climate Preparedness. And it's really it's a top priority of the governor to basically ensure that we're improving efficiencies in this space, and we're working to improve wherever possible the experience of impacted communities and individuals. They want to look at what other states, disaster-prone states, are doing in their policies and systems, with the assumption that disasters will only increase in frequency and severity as our climate continues to change. The two key areas they will serve are adding coordinating capacity at the governor's office level in support of recovery efforts in the local level. And second, helping to plan longer term and identify and implement improvements in the systems we have. The local governments will be key in both these functions. And so on the recovery side, he talks about they want to ensure a streamlined and well-coordinated recovery system with DOLA, the Department of Homeland Security, and other state agencies. And again, so he's saying many of these details are going to be ironed out once the director is hired and they have a robust community engagement process. They're just beginning this, so I think we all will be recruited to participate in helping to formulate this mission. And then on the planning side, they expect some longer term planning efforts to involve an external consultant that will again include a community process. There'll be working groups, advisory groups, and other intensive engagement work with local governments central to that work. I would just say that in my experience, I think this is a really exciting opportunity. As you may know, in the Department of Local Affairs already, there's the Colorado Resiliency Office, which has been a key contributor to helping communities build their resilience ahead of disasters, as well as help with the recovery. One of the things I've been advocating since I started this role in 2010 is for the governor to have a more active coordination role in the recovery process, because as you well know, in a large organization, there's a lot of different agencies going in different directions. And it just helps to have a single point of contact if you're a local government. So I'm really looking forward to that being implemented. So I'm sorry I don't have more details, but that's I think a really snapshot. I think if you look at the job description as well as the bill, you'll see there are some more, a little more details that they're offering. But I think this is something that the governor is envisioning that the local communities will be actively engaged in helping to design and structure. So that's a good sign to me that we'll be part of that. So that's what I have.
Great. Thank you, Gary. And I just want to give a shout out for those of us that are elected. We are expected to be on all day and all night and whatever hour, but our staff, including Gary and others that are on this call, are not. So really just want to appreciate the extra time today that you're giving to us to be here. And I got the pleasure of working with Gary after the flood of 2013 and have continued to do some community work since before this role. So really appreciate you, Gary, for being here. Questions, thoughts, ideas around Senate Bill 206 or what Gary was sharing specifically? I also threw the bill language in there just in the chat if anybody wants to pull that up, and Gary put in some information about that job in that description as well. Mark?
on mute. One point of interest that folks may have is that in one of the earlier stakeholder meetings around Senate Bill 206, when discussing the mission of the Office of Climate Preparedness, there was some discussion around how it's become clear that Colorado is transitioning to what you might consider a disaster-prone state. We can think of a handful of states that almost always seem to be in the newspaper or on the television news around some kind of disaster or another. You can think of the Florida, the Gulf Coast states, or Tornado Alley, or California with wildfires, right? And I think part of the effort behind 206 in the office is to begin preparing for a future where there will be more events like the Marshall Fire, other East Troublesome Fire, other disasters that we've seen in Colorado, and what can be done to get ahead of the curve in that respect. Gary, do you know by chance if there's going to be a formal opportunity for local governments to participate in 206 implementation or design and implementation? And I guess what I mean by that is often legislation will include a rulemaking component as the administration looks for input from key stakeholders on how to design a program or an initiative, and that's actually a formal process that the stakeholders can participate in. And so there may be a similar opportunity here for 206 in respect to the mission and the actual workings of the Office of Climate Preparedness. So if you don't know, we can look into that and see if there might be some formal opportunities for our local governments to participate in the process. That might likely mean attending meetings or hearings down at the Capitol at some point over the next number of months as the office ramps up and gets stood up.
Yeah, I think it's both. It's a both and. It's both outreach to community members, elected officials to help with crafting, the mission of this organization. But also, I think there are some formal advisory groups, working groups that will be stood up as well.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you being here presenting. It's a timely piece of legislation. As we all know, this session just ended, and this was one of those that was still being discussed right up to the end, and was in response really partially for around the Marshall Fire, which is region specific. So that's why we thought that would be an interesting one to bring for y'all. So let's go over to Jamestown. We've got a wildfire mitigation project to present. Thank you.
Ken, would you like me to screen share the presentation?
I would love you to screen share the presentation.
You got it.
I can see it.
Looks good.
It does look good, and that's why you can tell that this isn't something that I did, because this is much greater abilities with PowerPoint than I have. So I'm kind of borrowing this presentation, which was the presentation that was given to the town earlier in the spring. So how did all this happen? Jamestown Fire Mitigation Project is now a $157,000 project that is working on both town-owned and privately owned properties within the town of Jamestown. So I'll tell you a little bit how this all came together. In 2019, the town formed a wildfire safety committee, and that committee tried to put together some wildfire plans, and also got together with the wildfire partners, and some of the folks in Jamestown took advantage of that kind of a plan to go forward. And then later in 2021, the chair of that committee, Alan Mueller, was had kind of run into a brick wall as far as anything further that might be done with the resources that the town had, and had a conversation with some folks from Left Hand Watershed Center. And it seems that about the same time, the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership was getting put together, and the high point of all this was that the St. Vrain Left Hand Watershed Conservancy District, which is a taxing district, had a property tax increase passed a couple of years ago. So they actually funded this project first for about $127,000, and then right now that the funding has been increased to about $157,000 for this project. So go ahead, Mark. I've changed the next slide. So these are the four, actually the folks who are involved in this. The St. Vrain Left Hand Water Conservancy District is funding it. And then the project partners are the Left Hand Watershed Center, Left Hand Fire Protection District, Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation District, and property owners, and of course, the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership science team. So the Left Hand Watershed District is the organizer and is the administrative portion of the project. They have the project lead. And they are doing all the planning and also keeping all the records. The Left Hand Fire Protection District are the folks with the chainsaws, the sawyers, who are going to be doing the actual project as far as reducing the amount of fuel on private property and some public properties in Jamestown. And it's the Boulder Valley and Longmont Conservation District was the chief folks who actually did all the inspections and made the recommendations to the homeowners and the residents about which trees and which vegetation should be removed and which would be all right to keep. So it was collaboratively developed with the community. Nothing is set in stone. And we can go to the next slide, Mark. And so the purpose of the goals of the project is to create a fire break, actually to reduce fuels. And there are some properties and areas in Jamestown, because of the steepness, that haven't been mitigated at all ever. And this allows us to get at those particular properties. And for a small town, if you own property in a small town like Jamestown, which is completely surrounded by national forest, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to have your property mitigated. So properties that have been mitigated or are about to be mitigated can be very small, less than 1/4 of an acre, and some of them are a couple acres or more. So there's a wide variety of geology on this too. Some are in flat areas and some are in very steep areas. So the idea was, of course, to decrease the impact and severity of fires, and generally try to thin the forest to benefit, so that the trees and vegetation that survives will also have a better chance of surviving a wildfire on the ground. The adaptive management process is one that they do planning first, and then while it's going on, and then you come back to check to make sure that what you were trying to do stays in place. And this project will go on at least into 2023, although all of the work should be done by the fall of 2022. Next slide. So this slide is all about who's in charge of this. Basically, the landowner has the power to say yes and no. But the project does come through, walks the project with the landowner, and then comes back after they've thought about it a little bit and walks the project again. And then at that time, they put the flagging tapes, blue or green, on a tree or shrub that's going to be kept or be removed. I'm sorry, pink on trees and vegetation that is close to the hearts of the property owners, and once that is done and the property owner approves that, then they're ready to start the process on that property for mitigation. The next slide, please. So what are the potential project areas? Well, they started out with about 47 projects, and a lot of people who were adjacent to the original boundaries of the properties that were to be mitigated kind of joined in, and so this whole thing grew into something. So there's something more like 55 plus properties in Jamestown, and that's probably that is about 50% of the individual properties in the community anyway. So they have been very flexible, and so the project grew, and we were lucky enough to get some additional funding to cover that. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here is Jamestown, center of Jamestown, and those areas that are in green are the areas that are proposed for mitigation. And those are all on the south, west, and northwest portion of the town. The other portion of the town above Jamestown, there's properties that remain in white. If you go along the boundary, that's also a very steep area, and those areas are now protected by what's left of the Calwood fire and earlier the Overland fire, which were all on the other side of the ridge for the most part. But anyway, it turned out to be properties that protect the town now that the fire has already gone through. So to these, a few that were there were 6 properties that are Jamestown open space, and the rest of the properties are private. And it also includes some of the right-of-ways that were never or platted but never developed in the town. And so we had almost 95% participation. Very few properties decided not to participate. Next slide, please. So again, the St. Vrain Left-Hand Water Conservation District funds with 7A, and that was the number of the mill levy, the ballot measure that provided this funding. And then the Watershed Center leads the outreach, does all the communication, talks to the landowners and the town, and kind of keeps everything running. And then the Boulder Valley and Longmont, Boulder Valley Longmont Conservation District, Conservation District is developing the forest management plan, which will have the detail of the properties that will be mitigated. And the Left-Hand Fire Protection District will actually do the treatment as agreed by the landowner, and then property owners are involved from the beginning to the very end. And Then the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership Science Team does peer reviews, but they also will come back and take a look at how successful the project was over the next few years. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we can we certainly, this was part of the advertising for the project. Okay, next slide, please. This was the timeline for it, and we pretty much have stayed to this timeline. We had kind of our last community meeting at the end of May, and we've done all the property tours, and there's still a little bit of data collection to be done, but we're in line here to go ahead and start the actual mitigation, starting from the northeast portion of the town and working into the center during the month of June. So we would project that it will all be done by September or October. Next slide. Well, I guess that next slide. I guess that's it. That's all I have for now. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I think it's the goodbye. Yes, it is. And Charisse Forrester, who is the project manager for this, would be available for if you have any detail or questions or follow-up that you'd like to do with the Left-Hand Watershed Center. She knows I'm doing this, so you can go ahead and tell her, or you can ask me questions about Jamestown. But the Watershed Center is also kind of starting to look at some of the other private properties in Boulder County and Larimer County in the left-hand and St. Vrain and left-hand watersheds to continue these projects on private lands. Well, we haven't heard the last of them. So that's all I have. Any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Ken. That's great. Go ahead and just take yourself off mute because I'm not looking at the version so I can see everybody if folks have questions.
Ken Kleshuk with the City and County of Broomfield. Do you know how many acres are going to be involved in the mitigation?
I did go back to the slide with the map of Jamestown, if you can. Yep, that's it. That's the one. All right. That's about 50 properties, and probably the average property in Jamestown that's being mitigated is about a quarter to a third of an acre. So it's probably less than 20 acres, 20 to 25 acres. That would be a very wild guess.
Great. Councilmember Schaaf.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ken, thank you, and Jamestown for your presentation tonight. This is a great report of what you all are doing. Earlier this year, we went on our Broomfield water tour, and part of that is looking at the Northern Water Conservancy District. As we all know, there was wildfires up there that affected that region. And when we were talking with them, they said, we're in the water business, but now we're in the fire recovery and fire mitigation business as well, which is definitely a change. So I'm glad to see that the water district is participating in this project. I'm curious. This kind of goes off with Clay's question, but looking at that fire break, what is with your partners that are involved in this? What is the ideal size of that fire break between the private property owners and that wilderness area?
The purpose of it is not only to have that fire break or to have the pros properties. Not all the trees are going to be removed. They're not going to turn everything into gravel. But by doing this, and you see the area to the left below that map with all the little fuzzy dots, that's happens to be, for the most part, Forest Service. And the Forest Service is planning to do some work in the watersheds. And hold on a second. The St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership is working with the Forest Service to get those areas prioritized. So that by doing this work here, we're hoping and pushing for the Forest Service, when they decide to go ahead and spend their money on mitigation, that they would also like join up with these properties so that you have a much larger area that's been treated for mitigation and that. So by doing this, we're hoping that we can induce the Forest Service to go ahead and do some of these areas. Some of the areas that are beyond the James Creek, which is the blue wavy streak in the upper left-hand side of the map there. Those areas there have not been mitigated since the prior to the flood. Everything in town was cleaned up and mitigated, but if you go west of the town boundary along the creek, those are areas that really need to be worked on. So we're hoping we can get that done as well. So we do have this twofold. One, the protection for fire. But when you're able to protect from the fire and clean up from the flood, that also reduces the unfortunate mudslides and debris slides that come after a fire when you're in a steep area.
Thank you. And I'm just going to add, I did put a link in the chat. And then if you go into that link and then hit the information packet, that part of that presentation is some other information. It does talk about the fire break in there, but doesn't give any specific area measurements, just as a note. So anyway, it's just a reference, but go ahead, Trustee Harrison.
Thank you very much. Great work in trying to put this together. The question I have is, obviously with Louisville and Superior, we had the big issue was the wind and carrying embers that carried over a couple of miles and went into Louisville, Old Town. What of any conversation was there in terms of mitigation about trying to prevent that? I know that's kind of hard to do. That's number one. And then the second question, for Erie, we have dedicated open space that we have for every development we do. And the question I have is, should we think about where those open spaces should go to kind of mitigate for fires like this in terms of creating fire breaks as opposed to open space? Can you talk a little about those two?
Yeah, I'll answer your last question first, if that's okay. The open space is in various different conditions. Some of the open space were private lots that were never built on and that the town purchased through the FEMA open space or property plan. So those can never be built on. So those are like grassy areas, and so they are subject to grass growth and wind, and so that is a concern. Obviously, if the grass is cut, it's less of a concern. So depends upon whether or not you can get in there and actually, reduce the amount of fuel that way. Plains and mountains are very different in the way, and obviously that fire was extremely different from anything that happened in Boulder County ever. So I don't know how close the kind of work we're doing there would correspond to what you would need to do. I can tell you that working on the lots, and if you look at some of the things that the communities are doing and what the county is doing with regard to fire resistant building materials, That makes a big difference about whether or not a house catches fire. And having that space around the house without having trees overhanging or having a lot of vegetation around it is something that would help protect the house. But knock on wood, Jamestown has existed since 1884, and I'm sorry, 1883. And we've never had a fire in town that at least not a wildfire, that destroyed any property, any significant amount of property. So we've been very, very lucky as far as the wildfires are concerned. Not so lucky when it comes to flooding, that type of thing. Did I answer the question? I'm not sure I did.
No, you got there. You got there. Not a problem. No, it's very challenging. I think the other thing is, based on my understanding, is that Boulder County and the city, didn't we draft an ordinance that new buildings are supposed to be using those flame retardant materials moving forward? I just can't remember when that was going to start. Do we have any info on that? I can't remember off the top of my head. Anybody on the call?
I think you might be referencing, and someone else can jump in as well, the fire ignition resistant and
yes,
some of the building code that's being put in with Article 19.
Right.
And the expansion of the zones to include properties, not just mountain properties, but also in the plains.
Yes, all the way extending all the way to the eastern parts of the Erie. Obviously, we're involved in that upper to county line road. So with Erie being a split town between Boulder and Weld, it's going to be interesting for us as a town to figure out how to make that work.
Right. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
Yep, Commissioner, I have another question. I was trying to find this answer so that I didn't have to ask it, but I couldn't find it quick enough. How successful was this ballot measure? I mean, it's very interesting that it was put towards a mill levy. So I'm curious what the kind of politics look like for this ballot measure.
Are you talking about the St. Vrain left-hand watershed district ballot measure?
Correct.
Okay, well, the St. Vrain and left-hand watershed district for years and years had a very minimal, property levy, and that just supported one or two employees, and that was just about it. After the fires that they had in the watershed, those are the fires that were in mostly in Larimer County as well as in Boulder County. People were much more supportive of funding it, and so that money that passed, and I don't recall what the difference in the measure was, whether it passed by a little or a lot, but it is coming back to the folks who live and pay the taxes in that watershed. And so that's probably a pretty good motivation. And I don't know what other districts are, taxing districts that are concerned with the watersheds, but fire in a watershed is is something that you really want to avoid, even if you don't have any houses that are affected. Because all that water goes down into someone. Somebody has to drink it at some point, so that has to be treated. So I mean, it's very important that on the Front Range that we protect those watersheds.
Right. Thank you. Can I have a question? What kind of volunteer, I see in the timeline, the implementation, but just curious, is Jamestown going to be looking for volunteers to help with the project at some point, or is it really going to just be ran by those organizations?
at this point, the plan has not been written. But the bottom line is the actual work is going to be done by a left-hand fire district. So how much help they would get is unknown at this point. But I will, when I find out, I will let you know. But basically, right now, they're not asking for volunteers, but it may be that a month from now that they'll be looking for someone to help move materials around and that type thing. But as far as the sawing and cleaning is concerned, it's all supposed to be done by the left-hand watershed, left-hand fire district.
Okay. Okay, well, I won't offer up this group then. We'll wait to hear back from you. I appreciate that. We're all affected by what happens up in the mountains. I think that's part of the message here from the topics. Appreciate that. Great. Okay. Well, it sounds like we have a presentation as well from Boulder.
So, hi, everybody. I didn't bring a presentation with me and just thought I'd confine some of the activities that we're doing to just a few things, even though it feels like there's a ton that we have to do around, wildfire resiliency. But I think it's actually pretty relevant what Jamestown is doing, so that it leads well into some of the things I wanted to talk about. So in Boulder, we've been doing what we call home safety assessments for a few years, and even baked it into our master plan. We call them curbside assessments. So but picture, a crew of wildland trained firefighters who drive up in a neighborhood, and from the street, they don't need permission from the homeowner to actually look and see and judge whether this particular property is a certain risk classification. So they've done that through the interface portion of the city of Boulder that we can access. On the heels of the Marshall Fire, we certainly have had to redefine what that interface looks like. But the curbside assessments are interesting in the sense that we actually have a map online, we let people look at it. Here's, your property's color coded. And the idea, my secret idea was, hey, you look at your property, then you're going to want us to come out and actually do a more detailed assessment. So it was a little intended to be something to encourage folks, not just to say, hey, I got what this color, what does it mean on my property, but actually what can I do about it? And so our folks can go out and they will do a more detailed home assessment with the homeowner. It sounds very much like what Jamestown is looking to do. Walk the property, tell them what, how they can do that, leave a paper behind that explains what they can do, and then they would be responsible for doing that. What we hadn't planned very well for was two things. One, after the Marshall Fire, I suddenly went from just a few, we call them detailed home assessments. I went from a few to being back 400, almost overnight. That challenge is problem number one, because if we had 400, we've always had 400, we probably had way more than that we had to do. I'm glad people want us to come in and look at it. But once we found out, and didn't realize this, once you go in there and you walk with the homeowner, they actually go and do things to their property. And then they want you to come back and look at it and change the color on the map. So, hey, I fixed it, come back, don't wait for your next cycle or whenever it is you're going to come back and do home safety assessments, but actually change the color now, because I think I did everything you asked. Fair, that's totally fair. And that's actually what we want to be more responsive about. So that's something that's grown up. We've been doing that a while. And our goal from our master plan, which got adopted a few years ago, was to get to 60% of the homes along the interface on the western edge of the city of Boulder. And we've done pretty well. COVID, of course, has set us back in terms of being able to interface directly with homeowners. They were able to get out and do a lot of those home safety assessments. But like I said, now we're working on catching up and actually doing what we call the detailed versions. I've been asked many times now, will you do a home safety assessment in the rest of the city of Boulder? And the answer is yes. So now we are looking at, we're not drawing a line anymore half a mile in or 1 mile in from the western edge of the city. But if someone calls in and asks, we're going to go out and do a detailed home safety assessment and catalog it accordingly. Having said that, the other thing that's going on regionally now, all of you are probably very keenly aware of some of the, I mean, there's the prevention piece of things, and then there's the actual, what do we do when it actually starts going terrible for all of us, like it did in the Marshall Fire, and how can we get people out of harm's way as quickly as possible, which is the most important thing, you know, with property being a distant second. So getting people safely away. How do we notify them? How do we get them out in an orderly manner? What does that look like technically? So from an incident commander's perspective, when they go respond to a fire happening, we have to quickly be able to determine, well, is this a mile in front of this fire that we need to start telling people get out quickly? And how do we get them notified? And where do they go? And it would be so much better if everybody already knew that if you get notified, I know to take this road, I'm going to this predefined location because I'm part of this zone. And so one of the things that many of the flats agencies are doing right now with the offices of disaster management is starting to parcel out pieces of our different jurisdictions. Boulder has kind of done this for the interface, where we actually call them structure protection plan zones. The idea really is I can say zone 1, evacuate, and the dispatch center, which is responsible for notifying people, will be able to say, okay, I know exactly what zone 1 is. It's bounded by these areas. We click a button, boom, it's the easy button, there we go. We've had problems with over notifications, and I'll tell you that it's not just about inconveniencing people. It's actually about properly notifying people in order so they don't flood the streets and clog everything up. And so we want to be able to do it in a way that says, okay, first zone 1, we get them out. Zone 2, obviously people are going to go if they see fire, and we're going to have to deal with that anyway. But we don't want to complicate it even more by over notifying and then having a lot of people just jump into the streets and then clog it all up, and then we defeat the whole purpose. So the idea is we parcel out our areas, and we have a common terminology with our dispatch centers, and we're able to take from the field any directions and then push that out to citizens. Now there's multiple ways of notifications. There's the sirens, there's the WIA notifications, all of those things. Right now we're trying to hone in. The really, really heavy lift right now, and the quickest work we're doing, is actually figuring out those parcel sizes, if you will. I'm calling them parcels, I think they're called zones. And then figuring out how those evacuation zones will play out. So how we're going to actually use those zones to then notify. So it's connecting from the incident commander all the way through to getting people notified and out. So that's work that's actually happening right now in the heels of the Marshall Fire. And I'm fairly certain, as I think about everyone that was in the room, almost everybody from the jurisdictions represented on this call and others are talking about how we're going to do better there and actually map out. I believe the western edge of the county is already mapped out that way. And so it's the big part of it now is really east of 36, how we do that and how we do it in a way that makes the most sense and gets people out there. On the heels of that, we're going to have to talk about how we start notifying people, kind of things that they do in California, where people actually know their zone and they know that they have 2 ways out, at least an agreed upon 2 ways out. Here's one of 2 ways you can go, and here's where we want you to go. So it's a very easy button version of evacuation rather than the very hands-on approach where we go door to door, which we're probably gonna have to do anyway in some cases, and we just tell them go and they know what to do. And that's kind of our big challenge in Boulder. And I find it ironic. I was here during the floods, and it was the Marshall Fire that's really getting us to this point where, hey, we need to do a much better job of figuring out. But this was a 1-day really event, as opposed to the 3-week event that was the floods, which was, basically killing all of our services and hurting us all. But anyway, so those are 2 very, very big things. The one in the city of Boulder, one happening regionally that we're working on. The last thing I thought I would share is a little more around a realization that being able to dump resources very, very quickly that exist in Boulder County on certain fires is going to help us prevent, a wind-driven event if we can. And so one of the things that we call it a consortium as well of fire chiefs. The consortium has decided on a level of staffing during red flag days that will allow us to have more resources that any of us can call on to get quickly to different fires. And so, the Middle Fork fire actually that happened the same day of the Marshall fire. A lot of people don't realize this, but when we ran the models, it would have actually run and burned down Longmont. So you'd have had two large fires, and we dumped a lot of resources on Middle Fork, but then that's where a lot of them were that we had to pull from to go down to Marshall. So until we got the rest of the cavalry in from outside the county, we were strapped pretty badly with the wind event and the Middle Fork fire. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but that's a big part of some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes to try to make sure we have a lot of resources in the county from career agencies, and we hope to rope in everybody west of 36 as well for certain types of days like red flag days. But anyway, that was my quick and brief. They said I had 5 minutes. I hope I stayed within 5 minutes on that.
Thank you, Chief. Yes, well done. And just some really great information. I appreciate that. It looks like we've got a question already. Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. I think I would be, I really appreciate all the information, Michael, that you provided. I would be remiss and not representing my constituents very well if I didn't bring up the notifications during the Marshall fire. I know this is a county effort as well as anything else, but it's worth mentioning that, like, I've heard so many stories from so many of our residents who lost everything, who really got out with the shirts on their backs, who maybe only were told to evacuate like an hour after their house already burned down. We still don't have a good after action report even 6 months later, and so I would encourage the county to get the after action report out. I would also encourage the county I have gotten those during the NCAR fire. I got notifications to evacuate here in Louisville. And I know you know that probably, but that was a particularly traumatic thing, I think, for many people in Louisville who had just been traumatized by the fire. So I would really encourage the county, and to the extent to which this extends into Boulder, to make some changes here, because our folks still don't have answers about why this happened, even 6 months later. So in particular, the notifications to people, and why some of our communities were never told, or they were required to get into some sort of opt-out, Everbridge system, which is clearly not ideal, right? You don't want an opt-in system. You want an opt-out system, or you want an Amber Alert kind of situation, right? So that's the kind of situation that Louisville residents are particularly frustrated with right now, and quite frankly, they're directing that towards the county and towards the folks that have done really, and we have really appreciated our partnership with the county, just to be clear. But I do think that it's important to voice those in hopes that very quickly we will have some answers and we can work on a better solution, because this won't be the last time. So thank you for at least hearing that.
Thank you for sharing all those concerns and specific asks. I took some notes, so we'll follow up on those.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for City of Boulder? All right. Thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. Mark, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody else that was, and I guess I got to ask if there was anybody else that had something.
Take presentations from the floor.
And don't feel obligated, but certainly want to make sure if you had something there that you wanted to. Great. Okay. Well, let's do, let me check in on our agenda here. The next piece, just from a business standpoint, is our 2022 update on countywide transportation sales tax. And then we're going to get an update on regional local wage. And we've been here for an hour and 4 minutes. So we are going to take a break. We'll take a break for 5 minutes so you can stand up, maybe finish dinner or whatever that might look like. It's 7:34 right now. So we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll welcome our next presentation. And you can do whatever you need to do, and you'll hear my voice at, let's see here, 7:39. And we'll get going again. So thanks, everybody. Going here again. Thank you, Mark, for getting us going here. So our next presentation is the annual presentation that comes to the Consortium of Cities in regards to the update on countywide transportation sales tax. So similarly, I want to really just appreciate Boulder County staff because it's a late night and we appreciate you being patient with the schedule and being here to give us this update. So take it away. And I don't know if Tim's going to start or Kathleen, but you're both welcome to join in.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Ochamin. The first challenge is going to be sharing the right screen here, but I'm going to do that successfully. Share. Can you see the presentation or all the notes?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for having us. My name is Tim Swope. I'm the Capital Programs Coordinator for the Boulder County Public Works Department. I'm here with Kathleen Brackey, who's the Deputy Director of Community Planning and Permitting in charge of transportation planning. I think we're just gonna get right into it here. So yeah, the 2007 ballot issue has us updating the consortium on an annual basis. We're just going to provide you an overview of the transportation sales tax, a summary of the work completed, talk a little bit about our current projects, and then the projects for the next 2.5 years, next steps, and then we'll talk about the next steps for the sales tax and answer any questions you have. If there is any problems or if you have questions, just feel free to speak out because I can't see anybody or anything else except for the screen. Everything we'll be talking about tonight is in the memo that Mark distributed. It has the details and the actual reporting on progress with the program. It has tables talking about all the cost amounts and funding amounts, as well as our phasing plan that lists all the different projects. And I'm going to go over those today. For those of you who aren't familiar with the countywide sales tax, it's a 1/10 of 1 cent sales tax applied throughout the whole of Boulder County. So if you think about a 9% sales tax, this is 1/90th of that. It was started in 2001 and extended in 2007 and focuses on multimodal improvements with transportation improvements with a countywide benefit. It is an effort of the Consortium of Cities. Back in the 90s, all of your communities and the cities and towns were doing a great job of building out their multimodal infrastructure, their pedestrian ways and bicycle paths and bike lanes. But the minute you got to the city limits, then you'd be in the unincorporated county where, we really were just back to the 20-foot wide paved county road. So, so this was an effort by the consortium members to put together a funding stream that would allow the county to make some of those improvements and work together with CDOT and RTD and everyone to try to connect all the different communities. The current ballot issue sunsets on June of 2024, and will likely continue projects through 2025. But we are going to talk to you tonight about the potential of renewing that sales tax. So what have we done? The sales tax has been going for 20 years, but for this 15-year period, we've built over 50 miles of shoulders, made safety improvements to 10 intersections, built 13 miles of regional trails, supported transit services throughout the county, replaced 3 bridges, and built 6 new pedestrian underpasses. And I should say that quite a few of these projects are partnerships with you all and local towns and cities, or with CDOT or RTD. The county tends to come in as a supporting role, unless it's obviously our facility, in which case we do that. These are just some pictures to remind everyone about the facilities that have been constructed with either all or part by the county sales tax. It's a lot of infrastructure that I think a lot of us take for granted now as we drive around and ride around and take the bus around the county. I'm not going to go into all of these in detail. I'll just get to what we're doing currently. I do want to talk about the regional trail system. The whole Coal Creek and Rock Creek trail system was one of the big reasons we started the sales tax, funded the part of the US 36 bikeway through that, and currently working on connecting Longmont to Boulder through a variety of projects. Details on all the projects and the money involved is available on the county website through the 7-year update report, which is now almost 7 years old. But it does provide good information just on where the projects are, and kind of shows you what we've been doing with the county money. And then we also have been tracking progress. The original list, I think, of 42 projects has obviously expanded a bit because we do projects in phases, and the commissioners and the consortium have added new projects over the years. But this is sort of how we're going. We have our 33 road projects that we expect to get completed in this phase. There are a number of projects that we continue to list that are on hold or probably won't happen for one reason or another. We have all our transit, our transit projects, and the regional trails program. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview of the projects that we completed last year. The 3 projects that are under construction right now, and then those that we have remaining, both in the road shoulder and safety projects and the trail program. 2021, we worked with CDOT to complete the 287 and Isabel Road shoulder project. It was a large partnership with CDOT safety program and the town of Erie. Most of the improvements were intersection safety related, but we also were able to add bike shoulders on the entirety of the Isabel Road part of the project, including buffered bike facilities through the intersection itself. We also completed 71st Street shoulders, or phase 1 of the 71st Street shoulders, in 2021. Widened the road to add paved shoulders, and through a DRCOG federal grant, we're able to construct a multi-use path along all the way from Lookout Road to the Winchester, or I guess it's the Boulder Technical Center park, and they've really been isolated over the years, and so this provides a good connection for them. We currently have 3 road projects under construction. The Old Stage Road climbing, or I guess uphill shoulder project as you leave the city of Boulder and go up Old Stage. We're gonna be rebuilding all of Old Stage Road with county funds, but using the sales tax to provide a uphill shoulder for cyclists to use, but also just to improve safety on that slower part of the road. And then we are rebuilding Sugarloaf Road as it leaves Boulder Canyon, fixing the wall that has been falling down for a while, but was damaged in 2013 to the point where it really needed to be replaced. And then lastly, partnering with City of Lafayette on the South Boulder Road, multimodal improvements, which will signalize the intersection 120th and provide a new multi-use path, bike lanes, and sidewalk facilities for that important part of our community. So the sales tax expires in June of 2024. So we really, if once we get done with 2022, we really have a year and a half remaining of projects to do. This is a list of what we have left as far as the roadway projects go. We are going to construct 4 projects next year: 95th Street reconstruction from Boulder Creek to Lookout, 120th Street shoulders south of Lafayette, and finish phase 2 of the 71st Street shoulders, which is actually a City of Boulder road between the Boulder Tech Center and up to Highway 52. And then lastly, we're partnering with City of Longmont on adding paved shoulders to a short section of East County Line Road from Slayton Road down to the St. Vrain Creek Bridge that we replaced as part of the 2013 flood recovery. There's an additional 3 projects that we're going to be constructing in 2024. Our first big one on East County Line Road, which will provide paved shoulders from Quicksilver Road down to Pike, or Weld County Road 20.5. We are partnering 50-50 with Weld County on that project, and we'll provide not only paved shoulders but a roundabout at Pike Road, and then also protect against raising the road a little bit, protecting you against flood impacts for that facility. We are working with CDOT and the City of Longmont on the Highway 66 widening design of that project. Yeah, and those are kind of the 7 road projects that will be completed through this sales tax. For transit, we are continuing to operate the facilities that we've been running. Our role in transit is really to support the transit service providers, and so a lot of the services that we've done have been to encourage them to provide more service, with the idea that it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that once you get the service going, and certainly there have been recent troubles, but for the last 20 years it's been a good formula. So our annual services with the Flex Ride Lafayette's program, the Flex Express, which is service from Fort Collins and Larimer County down to Boulder. We also do pass support programs for the unincorporated county and some of the smaller communities. We've been working with Lions to help make up for the service that RTD's had to suspend between Lions and Boulder, and that's worked pretty well. And then we do run with Via Transportation transit route up to Gold Hill to serve the mountain communities. We're also in the process of doing 3 larger studies just to help move transit forward and keep and have plans for the future. And then lastly, the commissioners in the 2022 budget approved some funds as local match for federal funding opportunities along 119 and Highway 7 that are coming up. Obviously, a big focus on the state and federal funds, as well as funding from our partners, and that's true throughout the whole program. Yeah, so roads and transit together between the 2022 and then the year and a half of 2023 and 24, along with the federal funds, we are probably going to spend around $62 million. And fortunately, that same $62 million we're expecting in revenues. There is a typo in the memo. The bottom line is the same, but it just forgot to put that 11 million in there. So 62 million. So that is the roads and transit program. So 85% of the money that's collected in the county goes to fund the roads and transit and bicycle and safety programs. 15% goes into the county's general fund to fund the regional trails program, which also obviously has 2.5 years left. So these are just the projects we're working on now. The 4 Mile Creek Railroad Underpass has been a project since I started the county almost 20 years ago, but we are getting very close working with BNSF. We're anticipating that they will be building a structure, a railroad bridge at that location, which is down here on the right, just outside the city of Boulder. And then we will come in and build a trail underneath it next year. Boulder Canyon or Boulder Creek Trail, we've been doing some repair work up there, as well as just ongoing repairs to our trails program, such as plowing the entire US 36 bikeway between Louisville and Boulder, and just general upkeep of our multi-use paths and regional trails. We are well into the design process on the 119 bikeway. We're looking at potential alignments for a trail from Boulder to Erie along the old UP rail line. Trying to finish the Longmont to Boulder Trail, and just starting up a feasibility study of running a bikeway along US 36 north of Boulder, hopefully all the way to Lyons. And so we're have a federal grant to look at that. So that'll pretty much finish up our regional trails program. We are expecting about 5.9 million in expenditures and about 5.9 million in revenues, including money that's still remaining from past programs or past years of revenue collection. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kathleen here to talk about what's next in the transportation sales tax.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you. I've been having some technology issues. Anyway, I think it's really amazing when we look at all of the investments that are being made with the current Boulder County transportation sales tax. And especially when we think back and look over the past 20 years, the magnitude of mobility that's really been provided throughout Boulder County and connecting to the communities and providing safe options for people to travel using all modes of transportation. So as we look forward, it's really important when we think about ways to maintain that momentum and to continue the funding so we can continue the partnerships. Boulder County's transportation master plan was just updated in 2020. We know we've accomplished a lot together, but we know we also have a lot more in front of us to do, particularly to create a transportation system that emphasizes equity and sustainability and affordability. And how are we really growing into that vision of the future for the countywide transportation plan? So recognizing that the current sales tax is expiring in mid 2024, we want to look at options and ideas in terms of how to bring that forward, and how do we continue to do the good work together that we've been talking about, and how do we continue to have resources available to be able to leverage the available regional transportation funding through DRCOG, as well as the new state transportation funding that's been made available through Senate Bill 260 and the new enterprises, and then also the new federal infrastructure bill. So there's a lot of opportunity in front of us, and we want to make sure that we're able to continue to move forward and work together to implement this multimodal transportation system together. Thanks, Tim. So when we talk about funding for the future, it's important to think about how do we continue those options? And again, we've shared some examples tonight of projects that have been completed recently, as well as some that are on deck to be done soon. But these are the types of projects that we're talking about. If we could extend the current sales tax for another 15-year horizon, we'd be able to continue our safety and resilience projects and our roadway and intersection projects. For example, this is a picture of adding shoulders on a mountain road to improve safety for everyone and create a bikeable area, but then also to be able to expand our programs and services for our vulnerable populations. We're just in the process of wrapping up Boulder County's first human services transportation plan, where we're really doing a deeper dive in terms of mobility and access for all ages and abilities. And we know we have an aging population. We know we have a growing vulnerable population. So how can we continue to provide important critical services for people at all ages and stages of life? And then we shared some examples earlier this evening around our regional trails and bikeways. Those are foundational to the overall transportation system for Boulder County, and how do we continue that work in those places and connections that people love. And then continuing to grow our transit services like Ride Free Lafayette. So Boulder County does operate some transit services directly through contracts with Via Mobility Services. For example, Ride Free Lafayette is a great example of that. It's an on-demand service that currently operates in Lafayette. We'd like to look at ways that we can grow that and leverage our resources with other grants to expand it into East Boulder County area, and not just grants, but other partnerships with other agency partners as well. And then to continue our work on the regional corridors that are such a critical part of the network that connects us together across Boulder County and then connects us on beyond. So the image on this slide is a rendering of the Colorado 119 corridor, and looking forward where the commuter bikeway is included, and that will also include regional bus rapid transit connecting Longmont and Boulder, and then other intersection and safety improvements along the way. So just again, a kind of flavor of the types of projects and programs and services that we would like to be able to continue with the sales tax funding. Next slide, please, Tim. So when we look at potential options for funding, the pie on the left side is the sales tax expenditures when we look back over the past 20 years in terms of how we've been, some people call it slicing and dicing the funding. But again, this is averages over time in terms of road safety at 60%, regional trails at 15%, transit approximately 15%, and then the regional corridors at 10%. So just one idea, and again, none of this is decided, but one proposal is if we were able to move forward with another 15 years of funding, could we continue to fund the regional trails and bikeway and transit each at 15%, and be able to add, kind of squeeze in a slice of the pie for 5% for our mobility programs, and then retain the 10% for regional corridors, and then have the 55% for road safety and resilience. So again, nothing set in stone. We're just trying to develop options for consideration for this potential sales tax going forward. And can we go to the next slide, please? So one of the things I'd like to, we've got a lot going on there. Okay. A lot of visuals, but before we get to the questions, I just want to talk briefly about the process that we're going through for consideration of a potential ballot initiative for transportation this fall. And Commissioner Loachman, please feel free to jump in with this as well. Again, we're just looking at options and ideas. We want to get feedback from our local community partners through the process in terms of, how are we prioritizing the resources and the investments. So again, so that we can leverage and work together in a complementary way with the county and local communities. So we're seeking out information. We have a public meeting that's planned for June 14th. It's a virtual meeting. And just wanted to be able to share this information and let people know this is something we're working on. And importantly, let people know that our current sales tax is expiring and we need to be thinking about what are those options for the future so we can sustain that momentum going forward. So still more work to do. We'll be bringing this information forward for the Boulder County Commissioner's consideration later this summer. And if it were to go forward, then it could be something that's added to the ballot for November. So just in terms of what the next steps are coming up. But we're glad to answer any questions regarding the current funding for the sales tax or the proposed extension. Thank you.
Tim and Kathleen, thank you so much for all the great information and the updates. And if somebody has a link to that June 14th, I think it'd be great just to share it out with this group so everybody's in the know and can potentially share it in their networks as well. So there's my encouragement. And we've got a question. Councilmember Coombs. Or is it trustee? I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's trustee. It's fine. My question is regarding the upcoming proposal for extension of the sales tax, and that's whether or not part of it can involve emergency routes, that either the maintenance or construction of emergency egress routes. I mean, sticking with the theme of natural disaster resilience, can that be proposed as part of that, or would those not qualify?
I'm not sure if I heard the whole question, but I think what I heard was, could the funding from the future sales tax be used for emergency evacuation? Is that correct? So I think that we need to be thinking about all of those opportunities, and that's a very important one. Particularly, we're listening into the conversation earlier this evening. When we look at improving different transportation projects, we want to do as many things as possible to create what I call co-benefits. So if we can improve safety, we could improve how would they or could they function in an evacuation situation. I think that's a really great idea and something we could take back and figure out how that could be incorporated in this. I don't know, Tim, if you have some suggestions, but again, we want to create as many benefits as possible out of each project, and that might help us identify prioritization of particular corridors or routes.
Yeah, particularly up here in the mountains, we have a lot of challenges. Neighborhoods that were built in the 1960s when there weren't any rules about whether or not you needed to have 2 entrances and exits to a neighborhood and things like that. So we're dealing with a situation right now where the neighborhood I'm sitting in currently has only one way in and one way out, and it is heavily forested, and it's a huge risk. If there were to be a fire that would start to the west of us, then we would all be trapped. So that's something that we continue to struggle with, finding funding to be able to build an adequate egress. So things like that would be really nice to see in as part of the proposal for funding transportation moving forward. And I think that in particular, just looking at the map, obviously there's a reason for it and it makes sense, but a lot of the projects have happened down below, and it would be nice to maybe see some projects happen up here.
Okay, thank you. I can definitely take that back to our and think about how those types of things could be incorporated.
Thanks very much.
questions for our transportation team? Jocelyn?
Hi, yes, thank you. So I just wanted to get a clarification, and then I have a question. So one clarification is that you are proposing that this would be on the November 22 ballot or 23?
At the staff level, we've been working toward consideration for the November 2022 ballot.
Okay, and then I'm kind of curious because I know that you made a presentation to the Board of Trustees recently in Lyons. What do you want from us to be how to be promoting this? What would you be providing for materials, or what kinds of support are you looking from your elected officials?
And that's a great question. I think at this point, we've just been seeking information to help provide input into the decision-making or consideration process for the Boulder County Commissioners. And then depending on how that process plays out, we could provide fact sheets or information that would be helpful to share out to community members as well, but we're kind of taking it one step at a time. And so right now we're just seeking input to help, refine the options, help identify prioritization of investing the resources, things like that. So we're kind of at that front end of the process seeking input. And then depending on how it plays out, it would be great if you could help us get information, like fact sheets and things like that out to people.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would add that we have been working quite closely with the city and town staffs, their transportation or administrative staffs, at sort of what are the needs that are out there, what are the needs that have that countywide importance. And so a lot of the stuff we've been looking at, the projects we've been looking at, come out of those discussions.
Great. All right, well, it looks like maybe we don't have any further questions right now. I've got a couple notes from folks who had to go get to other meetings and family obligations and things like that while we were finishing up. So Tim and Kathleen, thank you for the annual presentations. This is really helpful, and the questions were great. I made a couple notes here too in regards to that emergency evacuation piece. It's a good reminder, so thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the next piece that we have on here is just an update from our last meeting in regards to livable wage, and the group decided that it was something we wanted to have a smaller group get together and talk about and see what the next steps might be. And I think one of the pieces here is what's the role of the consortium as well. So, and Lauren was kind enough and generous enough to take on the kind of the lead for that with a few other folks who said they were interested. So I want to turn it over, Lauren, to you. It's 8:12 right now. We're going to do our best to be done by 8:30. So just to give you that kind of time check in as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So I think one of the things we talked about last time was kind of going back everyone to their communities and checking in to make sure that we all had support to forming this working group. So I got my support from Boulder, but in sort of starting these discussions, it seems like one of the things, at least with Boulder, that we're pushing up against is having sort of staff resources to support an initiative like this. And it seems like that's potentially shared by the county. I don't know if that's something you guys want to touch on now or anyway. So we're kind of, what I've been looking at is how to get staff support and sort of the coordination to help support this effort moving forward. There aren't a huge number of pieces, moving pieces, because the state law is fairly specific in terms of how this gets implemented. But I think it's still important that we have the resources we need to do the outreach and consult with stakeholders and make sure that our local governments are on board. So I've been working with trying to find a couple of different ways to help bring more resources to this group. One of the things we've been talking about is how nonprofits or other community organizations might fit in to help support this effort moving forward. There are also some, on the data side, the Colorado Center for Law and Policy has agreed to release their first draft of the self-sufficient wages locally for Boulder County early to us in August, as to provide some data on how some of the changing income and various childcare is a big one that's moving a lot in terms of how that affects people's budgets and things locally. And then let's see. We also have I've been talking to the chamber along with the AFL-CIO about how they might support this, and we have sort of an potentially help from them or other organizations to help draft the ordinance. So we're getting a lot of different parts coming together, and I think that one of the things that I've also been thinking about, and it sounds like there's some support for, is there are the electeds that are part of this group, but not all community. There was interest in electeds in cities that are represented by the consortium, but by members that aren't necessarily part of the consortium. So potentially bringing in additional electeds as well to be part of this working group to move things forward. So it's been mostly just kind of process and research at this stage, but I think that, before our next meeting, I think that there's a lot of potential for us to get together and start to really move some things forward.
Great. Thank you. What questions do folks have?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on. I just put a wage tool into the chat that I finally found. I told Lauren, I think it was last month, that I was going to find that, and it took me a while to remember even what it was. But it's a great little tool that kind of shows what a living wage would look like in Boulder County. I ran it for Broomfield, which is pretty similar, but it also looks at so a single adult versus two adults, one working, two both working, and then as well as with kids. And it looks at expenses, and it kind of starts to lay out kind of what that would look like. And it's interesting because I think that what we're seeing across the map right now is that wages are going up in this kind of labor shortage. And so some of our typically lower paying, lower wage jobs, they're starting to really, move that up quickly. At least that's what we're seeing. But it's still definitely not close to that living wage for some of these jobs. And so it will be an interesting conversation. I think that, for us, it's the same thing that Lauren was talking about, is just having maxed out staff. This is definitely one of those kind of add-ons when we're dealing with so many other issues currently. And so it's definitely hard to have a focused conversation about this. We just had a change in our chamber leadership, and so that definitely affects this conversation as well. So just wanted to give you kind of the what's up from Broomfield.
Thanks, Devin. I know Marta and Mark, you guys have been talking a little bit about, the county and sort of what support there might be there. And do you have any kind of update you could share with us on that at the moment? Or
Sure, and maybe I think my first question would be, what kind of support? What do you mean by support? As far as, do we have a board who would support livable wage, or do you mean, do we have support as in resource, whether that's human resource or county resource, et cetera? So yes, we've got support from a concept. Obviously, we don't have any details, and that's what this group, the working group, would be putting together. Would be, what is that wage? The other question I have for the group who've been talking in the interim would be, have you all talked about a timeline? Are we talking about January 2023? Are we talking about January 2024? And if that hasn't, or is that working group going to work through that in the next month or so? And I say that because the timeline is a real factor for this particular working group. Just the way that the legislation works. So I just want to throw that out there too, and would love to hear from anybody else, even if you haven't been part of the working group, just to get a pulse, because I feel like that might be helpful as well for the working group. Because this group meets every other month, so that working group is really going to have to, I think, get some real momentum, work plan, timeline, commitments, define those orgs that you were talking about, the community organizations, Lauren, that y'all have already started on, which is excellent. So I would just love to hear from other folks about their thoughts, if you feel like that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Commissioner, when you say timeline, sorry, Kyle Brown here. When you say timeline, do you mean for implementation? Do you mean for passage? What are you talking about?
Yeah, thanks. Well, in my mind, it would be twofold. If the group says we really want to see this happen by January 2023, then we have a work plan timeline that we've got to put together, public process, the different places, everything procedurally that would have to happen, and or maybe connected timeline if the livable wage group says we just want to get to one wage, or if we're trying to tier, then that might be another timeline piece. But I think to be able to make it happen January 2023, if that's the decision, then I think that's going to help create the process timeline. Does that help?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think that honestly, Denver has set the standard here, right? Denver has an ordinance that complies with the state law. The state law puts some pretty strict limits on how much we could raise it anyway. I really don't think this is that complicated, to be honest with you. But I think it's a matter of if there are things to discuss, fine. But I think this is a matter of how, as opposed to a matter of whether, in my opinion. And so, if there are communities that are in the weather category, then I would encourage them to, maybe meet separately. If there are communities that are in the how category, then I would encourage those to meet separately as well. Because I think personally, and I think I can speak for, at least our mayor on this, that I think we're in the how category. And we would be interested in, working with municipalities who are interested in doing this within the confines of what's been allowable under state law, and using Denver as a model.
Thanks for that. Is that helpful, Lauren?
Yeah.
Provide some direction.
I think that's great. I don't know if anyone else wants to clarify, if they feel like they're in the how category or the, as we move forward. Or, and then I see there are a couple of names here still. I don't know if people who didn't volunteer to be part of the working group, but I don't know if that, if there's any additional interest from people in being part of the working group. You know, Eric, Devin, and Kyle, you guys have all expressed interest in the last meeting.
Yep, I'm still in, clearly. I mean, I will just say that for what it's worth, right? Like, we call it a livable wage. I mean, what's allowable under state law? Hard to make an argument that that's even still a livable wage, right? Like you know, what it takes when you look at something like CCLP's sustainability, what's it called? Their index, self-sufficiency index, excuse me. Mm-hmm. Hard to make an argument that even if we were to raise it as much as state law were to allow, hard to make an argument that we've actually achieved that goal. I also think it's an interesting conversation to have when I regularly see signs now at fast food restaurants that say they're paying $18 an hour, right? And that's higher than we could ever raise it. So I don't think we need to overthink this. And so I would just encourage us to kind of like I'm happy to meet tomorrow practically with folks, put it together, get something on the books, and then I think get something with all of our municipalities to say, like, we're all going to do it the same week and we're going to move forward together.
Lauren, are there any towns and municipalities that you haven't heard from yet that you're still wanting to get just a pulse?
Let's see.
And I know Mark has his hand up as well. And we've just got a couple more minutes.
There are still some municipalities that I'm trying to confirm who, like, if there's a different representative that wants to become a part of the working group. But
I need to hop off real quick to another town meeting, unfortunately. But I just wanted to say that I cannot speak for Netherland as a town or as a board, only for myself. That I'm interested in putting this forward, proposing it. I mean, our board isn't even fully seated right now. We have a special election coming up in August, so it's kind of all a mess as it currently stands. So I definitely cannot guarantee that there's positive interest in this from Netherlands side, but it's something I would like to propose to our board.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, bye, folks. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great night. I think Mark had a hand up first, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Pro Tem Farrell can go for it next. Yeah.
Thank you. I just was going to say, this is my first time coming to your meeting, so I can't speak specific to Lions, and I don't think I've had this conversation with Mayor Rogan at this point, but that's not to say that we would be not interested in this. I think we absolutely would be, and I would be interested in bringing this forward to our board of trustees and seeing if there's a member on the board that could perhaps be willing to participate in your group. But this is the first time I've heard of this. So if there's any information perhaps, or that you can send me, then it is certainly, I'm willing to bring it up and see if we can appoint someone for sure.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd be happy to send kind of the slide presentation that we put together for the last meeting. And that would be, I mean, if you could reach out to the other trustees and let us know if there is someone who would be interested in joining, that would be wonderful.
Okay, happy to.
And just, I know we're close on time, and just to that point, Mayor Pro Tem, if you, the email you received with the invite to this meeting and background information includes a link to the consortium's webpage on that Boulder County website, and you can access recordings of past meetings, including the recording of the April meeting. And this topic was, if I remember right, the very first topic that was discussed at the April meeting. So you could watch, it might have been a 20 or 25-minute conversation. You could get all sorts of background and things on the legislation that eliminated the state preemption and provided this opportunity for local governments to establish their own local wage. And then some of the conversation that the council member and trustees have led in that during that discussion in April. And just a question to the communities that are in the how to do it bucket. One thing that's important in respect to trying to meet a January 1, 2023 implementation date is that you're tied to that date because of the way the legislation was written. Any local wage has to be implemented in sync with the annual increase to the state minimum wage, which happens every January 1. If there's interest in doing a regional approach, the legislation contemplates that and provides authority for that, but says that that has to be accomplished through intergovernmental agreements among the participating entities. So one piece of this timeline will be determining whether it's through the self-sufficiency index or some other data, what is the number? And then another component of the effort will be moving that through the machinations of local government and eventually getting to an intergovernmental agreement that everyone signs on to, so that January 1, 2023, there can be implementation. It'd be very helpful for me to if any of your attorneys could help us wrap our arms around how long will it take your communities to actually pass the ordinance, get it published, passed, get an intergovernmental agreement signed and everything done, right? So will that take 4 weeks? Will it take 6 weeks? Will it take 2 weeks? I don't know, but it does in some sense shorten your working period because you have to allow for that. Every jurisdiction would have to adopt an ordinance, set a local wage, and then sign an agreement. So and maybe there's a way to do that in a compressed time frame, but just trying to get a handle on all aspects of the process would be useful so that the time between now and the end of the year can be used most effectively.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Mark. I would say if for each municipality, each town, Lauren just needs to hear from, if it's not you, but it's somebody else on your council, then that's great. But she just needs to hear from everybody so that if folks want to be part of the IGA, you have the opportunity to get in there and we can work with your attorneys and all that good stuff. So I think that's part of what I heard tonight as well. So we are at time and everybody has Lauren's information in regards specific to livable wage. It looks like there were a couple other events that were noted in the chat. Appreciate everybody being here. Certainly staff, Mark, thanks for coordinating, keeping us together here. And just appreciate the conversation and the work. And we'll send out, the county will send out an update before our August meeting because we meet every other month and hope to have some updates and work in progress. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great night.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.